Are you willing to take these things and store them in your home or in your car or in your garage or in some other space? And then when you bring them here, you can spread them out all over the floor. You can get as messy as you want for that time. I'll even help you clean it up at the end. And then we put it in that agreed upon storage space. That's one idea, but it doesn't have to be the only idea.
Welcome to the Minimalist Podcast, where we discuss what it means to live a meaningful life with less. My name is Joshua Fields Milburn. My best friend, Ryan Nicodemus, is going to be joining us here in a moment. But in the meantime, I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, TK Coleman.
It's a beautiful day.
From Alabama's here.
Hi, everybody.
We've got the rest of our team in the studio as well. Coming up today on this free public minimal episode, a caller has a question about some harm that's being done by decluttering. And another listener has a question about music clutter and digital clutter and the unexpected clutter caused by all of that excess digital media that we are now facing. Then we've got our lightning round segment. We've got a FAMS question and a listener tip for you. You can check out the full 2-hour maximal edition of episode 413, where we answer 5 times the questions and we dive deep into several simple living segments. That private podcast episode is out right now, patreon.com/theminimalist, or click the link down in the description. Your support keeps our podcast and YouTube channel 100% advertisement free because, say it with me, y'all, advertisements suck. Oh, man. By the way, the advertisement suck segment this week over on the private podcast, TK and I, we have a bit of a debate, like a 20, 30-minute debate. I found someone who had been scammed by scammers. Now, I think all advertisements are scams, and we're going to dive deep into that. And TK is going to interrogate me on my idea of all advertisements being scams. But before that, let's start with our callers. If you have a question or a comment for our show, you can give us a call, 406-219-7839, or email a voice recording right there from your phone to podcast@theminimalists.com. So if you have a comment about any of the questions that we answer on today's show, we'll be happy to air your voice on a future episode. Email that comment in, podcast@theminimalists.com. Our first question today is from Maria.
Hi, this is Maria, a Patreon subscriber from the Philadelphia suburbs in Pennsylvania. I was a homeschool mom for a large part of my mothering life, and that is no longer part of my mothering. And I have tons and tons of homeschool materials and also a lot of toys. I was eliminating many of these toys, not all of the toys. I eliminated all of the homeschool materials, but I donated them to a school, and I subsequently got hired by the school. So how crazy was that? My daughter was a little upset. She seemed hurt that I would give these things away because her children enjoy them when they're at my house. And I reassured her that I was not giving everything away. I was just giving most of it away. It's not part of my world anymore. And I know that she is bothered by this. So I am bothered that she is bothered. But I also recognize this is her new identity, a young mother, and I'm an old mother. I find that I am upset that they are upset. It feels almost like I am betraying them, or it feels like I'm abandoning them. It's a very strange experience. And I was just curious to know your thoughts on this.
TK, this certainly resonates with me, man, because I get upset when I upset other people. And so I empathize with Maria. I realize that it's not my job to unupset you. And technically speaking, I can't upset you. It's your expectations of me that upset you. And that's really where Maria is right now with her daughter. Her daughter is upset because she had a worldview that doesn't map onto reality. Maria's like, hey, I don't want these things around my house. And the daughter's saying, well, I expect you to hold on to them. Now, for me, it's helpful to take something like this to the extreme. if I were to ask you if you had a pet that died and I said, well, I need you to keep it at your house because I still like seeing that pet, you'd be like, no, I don't want it here. I simply don't want it here.
Yeah.
And I would be selfish to be asking you of that.
Yeah.
But with something like toys, it doesn't feel like it's like that egregious of an ask for me to say, oh, can't you just keep those toys around I know they're in your way, but we really get value from them. So can you hold on to something that you don't get value for because I do get value from it? What are your observations?
Yeah, it's always tricky when you try to size up for another person how big or little you think their problem is, because pain is so irreducibly particular. It's not just about the size of the circumstance, the size of the thing you're dealing with. It's also about you and what you're bringing to the table and what you're dealing with internally. And so two people can have the same possession or the same problem, and it can be vastly different. And so you always get yourself into trouble when you base your standards and you look at someone else and say, well, that's not a big deal for you. But, I will say that it's nice to see people a little upset from time to time, especially as a starting point, because I think being a little upset is better than sleepwalking through life. When you're upset, when you get your feathers ruffled, sure, if you turn around and take that out on people or you let that anger consume you, that's unhealthy and it's going too far. But we can become so apathetic. We can become so afraid of conflict that our only response to people being bothered by us or not getting something that we want is a certain sense of guilt or giving up or some other form of powerlessness. But when we're upset, that says, hey, wait a minute. There's something I want to fight for. There's something that really matters to me. And so for the daughter, having access to those toys, man, that really matters to her. And that feeling of being upset is sort of like an alarm bell ringing off in her heart saying, hold on, something matters. And for the mom to be upset, it's like, wait a minute, my freedom matters. My right to do what I want to do in my home matters. And so this is good as long as we don't treat this as the end, because now we can come to the conversation as living beings with real feelings and real values, and we can tackle this.
Yeah, you can tell me what matters to you. The problem we run into is when everything matters, then nothing matters in a way. When I get upset about everything and I feel I've been tread upon, or you know what? Now I start pointing the finger and I start blaming the people. I'm upset because of something you did. And that is true. I am upset because of something you did, but I'm really upset. What's the upset behind that? Has to do with the expectation. Oh, I thought things should be this way. You think they should be this way. And unless you completely conform to my worldview and do the things that I think you should do, then I'm going to be upset. But I think you're right here, putting this on the table and saying, hey, this does matter to me. Oh, this matters to me. Tell me what matters to you about this. Why are you upset right now? As opposed to saying you shouldn't be upset. We talked about this last episode with my daughter, although it was on the private podcast side of things, and my daughter's boyfriend broke up with her. Now, she's 10. So boyfriend means boy that she holds hands with occasionally. And he called to say, hey, can we just be friends? And instead of me going, Ella, you are just friends. And she's upset and she's crying, right? And all of a sudden, I felt the compulsion to be like, don't cry. Now, I didn't say that.
Yeah.
I stopped myself from saying, don't cry. Because then I'm pathologizing how she feels. And when I look at Maria and what she's going through, you don't want to pathologize your daughter's, the fact that she's upset. She may be saddened, or she may be angry, or she just may be frustrated. Now, she might be frustrated about something else as well. And then it manifests as, I can't believe you got rid of those toys. But maybe she's actually frustrated because she got a parking ticket, or because the kids didn't get the grades that she wanted in school. And now it is showing up in all of these interesting ways.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that your story makes me think of is just how important curiosity, empathy, and conversation is whenever we have conflict with loved ones. If it's someone who's a total stranger, you don't care anything about them, you don't even feel bothered that they want something from you, and you can just easily look them in the eye and say, no, I'm not accommodating that request. Well, that's easy. But when it's someone that you care about and you want to get along with and have future interaction with, It pays to just be curious, to be empathetic, and to try whenever possible to work out a solution together that works best for both of you. You don't always have to rely on force in order to have power. You don't have to rely on coercion in order to co-create. And so one thing you could do is you could sit down with your daughter and you can say, hey, look, I respect where you're coming from, and I acknowledge that there is value in you wanting to have access to these toys when you bring your children over. I honor that, and I want you to have that. For me, I need the peace of mind of having a clutter-free home. How can you help me facilitate an environment where you have what you need when you bring your children over while honoring what it is I need? Are you willing to take these things and store them in your home or in your car or in your garage or in some other space? And then when you bring them here, you can spread them out all over the floor. You can get as messy as you want for that time. I'll even help you clean it up at the end. And then we put it in that agreed upon storage space. That's one idea, but it doesn't have to be the only idea. But work with me here. When you give people the luxury of putting all the pressure on you to come up with a solution to their requests, they don't have an incentive to think critically and creatively about it for themselves. But when you enlist them in the solution process by saying, hey, here's what I need, here's what you need, I don't think there's any right or wrong about it, I validate both what you need and I need, let's work together to figure out what we can do, then you take away from them that moral high ground of being able to stand above you and saying, I'm mad at you for not accommodating my request. Now they have to do the hard work alongside you of saying, what are we going to do to make sure we can harmoniously coexist together since we love each other and that's what we want to do anyway?
What you're talking about here is making room for healing in the relationship and actually facilitating the healing, because your daughter right now, Maria, she feels like she's been harmed by your decluttering.
Yeah.
And that harm to her, even if it's psychological harm, it is real. And the way we can make that harm worse is we aggravate the wound by saying, no, you're not harmed. You shouldn't be harmed. I didn't offend you. I didn't upset you. You upset yourself. Those things might be true. They're just not really helpful in this conversation. And what I've learned from many years of letting go now of material possessions, but letting go of other things as well, letting go of the emotions that fuel much of my discontent.
Yeah.
And instead of holding on to them, it's okay to hold on, right? But holding on too long, it leads to clinging. But letting go too soon is a type of falling in a way. It leads to falling, at least.
Yeah.
I use my rock climbing analogy with that. When I'm rock climbing or bouldering, yeah, if I just let go too soon, I'm going to fall. And I think the thing is happening here. You were ready to let go, but your daughter wasn't. And it's okay. You are where you are right now. But what is the path forward, the path toward healing? Maria, I'd love to send you a copy of our book, Everything That Remains. It was this journey of letting go and many of the difficulties of letting go of the stuff and much of the other types of clutter that were exposed as I started letting go of my excess stuff, my mother's excess things, the people that thought I was crazy for letting go. I mean, people thought I was suicidal because I was getting rid of my stuff, even though I was freeing myself of the burden. And Maria, that's what you did here. You freed yourself of this burden, but now you're picking up a different burden from your daughter. You can work through this together without blaming and without suggesting that your problem becomes her problem becomes your problem. You'll enjoy Everything That Remains. It's my favorite book that we've ever written. If you like our podcast, you'll enjoy the audiobook version of Everything That Remains. Or if you want the book or the ebook version, we'll be happy to send that to you as well. Our next question is from Tyler.
Hey all, my name is Tyler, and I'm a Patreon subscriber from Ann Arbor, Michigan. I was recently looking through my old like songs on Spotify and noticed a bunch of songs I don't listen to and probably won't listen to very much going forward. And this brought to mind a question that I didn't really think about before, but is our digital music library now becoming a new form of clutter?
Tyler, I do think that much of what we have digitized has the ability to become digital clutter. Personally, I think it's less problematic than physical clutter because there's an actual physical burden. I can have 2,000 books on my e-reader, whether it's a Kindle or Nook or whatever, But if I have 2,000 books in my home and then I move to a new home, I have to carry all those with me. And this really stands out to me because I once threw out my back carrying a box of books while moving. But anytime I carry a Kindle somewhere with 2,000 books on it, I don't feel like, oh, you know what, I'm going to throw out my back. However, that doesn't mean that just because physical clutter is potentially a bigger problem than digital clutter, doesn't mean digital clutter isn't a real thing. And so, TK, I'd love to talk to you. I could talk about some things practically, right? But I've realized that clutter is often contextual. And so for you, what is a treasure might get in the way for me and vice versa. Your treasures could be my clutter could be my treasures could be your clutter. And understanding that is with digital products or services or whatever, whenever we're doing something unintentionally, consuming something physically, or we're involving ourselves in a relationship that is unintentional, or we're consuming something digitally, it can become clutter whenever it gets in the way.
That's right. You know, simplicity isn't about less. Simplicity is about that which is essential. And so anything that gets in the way of a healthy and constructive focus on that which is essential becomes clutter for us. And so when it comes to digital clutter, if you have a playlist of 100 songs and you know that 30 of them you're never going to listen to again, you have completely moved on. Every time you go in that list to listen to a song you want to hear, you've got to sift through the ones that you know you don't like anymore. And so that's clutter because it literally gets in the way of you focusing on that which is a part of your joy in that moment. Same thing with digital photos, same thing with digital books. Anything that has reached its expiration date in terms of bringing us joy, it just gets in the way of us finding whatever it is that we're looking for. And not only that, but we're also using up mental capital by having to make decisions about those things, right? You're trying to figure out what movie you're going to watch, what book you're going to read, and you're not only sifting through these things, but sometimes they represent themselves, and you're like, well, what should I do with that? And you're just wasting valuable energy and time. So digital clutter is real, and in many ways, it's a greater monster than physical clutter because the physical clutter has a way of imposing on your life by saying, you feel the weight of having to carry me around? Do you feel that inconvenience of having to bump into me when you walk through a room? But digital clutter is like, oh no, I'm no problem. I'll just hide over here in the back. You won't even notice that I'm here. I'll just hide myself under the rug. You won't even know. I'll just hang out in the closet. You won't even know. And then that stuff is just getting in the way every time you go looking for something that you need.
Nicodemus and I did an episode about hidden clutter, and that's what you're talking about here. Sometimes the hidden clutter is even more pernicious because we hear out of sight, out of mind, but that's not true. Sometimes it's out of sight and it's still taking up that space in the back of your mind. Professor Sean, would you put a link to that episode, Hidden Clutter, in the show notes over at theminimalists.com/podcast? By the way, if you are on our email list, we send out our show notes to you every Monday whenever a new episode comes out. We won't send you advertisements or junk or spam, but if you head on over to theminimalists.email, you can just subscribe to our show notes and any other emails that we send out. We'll never send you any junk. I'm thinking about one more thing here for Tyler, though, and it's listening clutter. Because I think it's a type of digital clutter in a way, but I've learned over the last few years, sometimes silence is more valuable than the noise. In fact, quite often, almost always, silence is more valuable than noise. But sometimes silence is just more valuable than the words or anything else that we're listening to, whether it's podcasts or music or YouTube and all these different digital clutter formats, ebooks, digital music, even physical media. The silence, the space we create with silence is so important. And this is something that clutters my life, is feeling, because I'm a completionist, feeling as though I need to listen to all of the podcasts from this person. I get obsessive, and so I dive deep. And it drives me crazy when I hear people say, I've listened to all of your podcasts. I started with episode number 1. And I'm like, oh, that's the worst place to start. In fact, all of our archives are over on Patreon now because I think it's great that we have access all the way back to 2015, episode 001 with the Minimalists. But the best place to start is probably somewhere around episode the current episodes and working your way backward to topics that really align with your interest. Do you have an interest in hidden clutter? Do you have an interest in minimalist parenting? Do you have an interest in minimalist weddings? Great. We have specific episodes for any of those topics you're interested in. And you can find all of them over at theminimalists.com/podcast. I would say take a look at the hidden clutter episode, but then also think about what are the things that I'm spending my time on? And the question I'm often asking myself, TK, is this the best use of my time?
Yeah.
Because I might want to say yes to watching this YouTube video. I might want to say yes to scrolling TikTok or Instagram or X or whatever it might be. I might want to say yes independently, isolated instances, saying yes to these things. But is that the best use of my time? My time is such a precious resource. We do this with our money all of the time.
Yeah.
If I have $100 and then I see something that's $100, I might want that thing. But then I can't buy the thing I actually want with that $100. I can't invest the $100 the way I want to invest it. I can't pay my rent with the $100 because I've spent it on this other thing that in isolation was a yes. But when you pan out, it has to be a no so I can say yes to what's truly important. We rarely think about that with respect to our time and our attention. What am I spending my time and attention on? Because there are no refunds for misspent time and misspent attention.
So good. And by the way, you talk about compulsive completionism, where you force yourself to complete things that are no longer useful or enjoyable just because, well, I started it, so I got to complete it. There's another kind of completion that can be very life-giving and help eliminate digital clutter. And that is creating playlists that you know you actually have a chance to get through. So for instance, I love saving YouTube videos that I don't have time to watch right then and there into like a watch later or a categorical folder. But sometimes what happens is those folders just get really, really big. And now I got a playlist of 100 YouTube videos. And that starts to feel really overwhelming. And if I step back and I'm honest with myself, I say, okay, look, if I got 20 playlists, each of them with a few hundred videos apiece, I'm never going to finish all those.
Yes.
So why don't I just tell myself the truth right now and decide which one of those I'm not going to finish and just go through that sucker and start deleting. And what I give myself the opportunity to do is to now complete a playlist. That playlist only has 12 videos in there. Over time, I finish that and I get to delete that playlist and I feel that positive sense of accomplishment. And so digital clutter robs us of that sense of momentum and growth and fulfillment that we get from actually doing something that we said we're going to do. It can feed that sort of procrastination muscle, so to speak.
And since we're talking about being harmed by decluttering, one of the rules that really I think stands out with respect to this question, and I use it all the time. In fact, I've embodied this rule, is the spontaneous combustion rule. You can find it in the Minimalist Rulebook. You can download it for free, theminimalists.com/rulebook. It's my favorite decluttering rule, spontaneous combustion rule. And I think it also applies to our digital clutter as well. If I pick up any object, I pick up this comb right here for my hair, which looking nice today. Come on.
Let me borrow that, man.
And if I look at this comb and I say, if this were to spontaneously combust, would I feel relief or would I replace it? Well, for this, I'd replace it because I use a comb regularly. But if I would feel relief, like, oh yeah, that's actually been a burden. I never use this thing and I've been procrastinating. I haven't been letting it go. I've wanted to let it go, but I just haven't spent the time to do it. I'd feel a relief if it spontaneously combusted. Well, what if your digital playlists? What if your digital music? What if it all just erased spontaneously? Now, it's not a rhetorical question. You might feel panic like, oh no, I lost it. But sometimes I will do the same thing with my YouTube. I do the watch later folder.
Yeah.
And if it gets overwhelming, you know what I do? Go in, delete all.
Yeah.
And I just feel this, the full body sigh of just letting go of the burden of obligation.
Yeah.
And I can pick those things back up if I need it, but if not, and if I feel that sense of relief, that silence from letting go, oh, that's where the real value is. Welcome back, y'all. Guess who's joining us on the phone? My best friend, the co-founder of the Minimalists, Ryan Nicodemus is here.
Yay!
What's up, y'all?
Ryan, I'll have you know that Danny's not applauding right now. He's going to say it's because he's using the camera switcher over there, but I think there's some animosity.
Man, jealousy does funny things to a person.
Man.
Good to hear your voice, Ryan.
Ryan, we
Likewise.
got so much to talk about. I know that you were stranded at Burning Man for the best week of your life. We're going to get to that during the TK's X of the Week segment. We used to call it TK's Tweet of the Week. We'll do that on the private podcast because I know you've got a lot to cover there. But first, Alabama, what time is it?
You know what time it is. It's time for the lightning round where we answer your questions from TikTok.
Yes, indeed. You can follow The Minimalists on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and X. We're at The Minimalists, also at Threads as well, at The Minimalists. During the lightning round, we each have 60 seconds to answer your question with a short, shareable, less than 140-character response. We put the text to these minimal maxims in the show notes so you can copy and share our pithy answers on social media if you'd like. You can find those show notes, theminimalists.com/podcast. Sarah has a question for us today.
Do you think hoarding gets better as generations pass? I'm finding that as each generation goes by in my family, we're getting better at decluttering our stuff, so I can work toward being a minimalist. Is there something to this, or is it just my family?
Ryan, do you have any observations for Sarah? Is there something to this?
Oh, sure. I mean, if I had a pithy answer, it would be this. Simplicity is an experience, not a prescription. So what's happening here is that Sarah and her family, they have discovered the benefits of simplifying. They have discovered the benefits of not hoarding all of those generations of past clutter. And that's really when people start to move towards simplicity, is when they experience the benefits, not just because someone tells them that it'll make their life better. But to add to that, Sarah and her family, they have united around something. And that's pretty cool. So not only have they experienced the benefits, but they found something that they can all work on together to live a more meaningful life.
Amen. TK, help me build on that.
Yeah. I mean, I think her family's doing it right, man. Her family's doing it right. And it's not just her family. It's part of a broader conversation that's happening. You know, I think a liberated mind is the greatest legacy that you can possibly leave. You know, when we die, we don't just leave our possessions behind. We leave behind patterns of thinking, patterns of feeling, patterns of processing, patterns of behavior. And when those patterns are healthy, we make it easier for the next generation to find meaning and simplicity in life. And so one of the beautiful things about minimalism is that it changes the conversation around what it means to have a legacy. It introduces this notion of what I call spiritual estate planning, where it's no longer about who gets to keep my stuff, but it's how can I leave behind some wisdom so that people aren't inheriting my baggage, and so they have the tools to more effectively unpack their own. That's what your family is doing, and it's one positive indicator of something that's happening broader.
I think it's spot on. What you're talking about is sort of the ripple effects there, right? Letting go is contagious.
Yeah.
And they see you letting go, but they don't actually see the letting go. No one really cares about the decluttering side of things. They, as Ryan just mentioned, they care about the benefits. They see the joy. They see the freedom. They see the excitement. They see the calm. They see the peace. They see the tranquility that is a byproduct of letting go. So if letting go is contagious, so is joy. But you know what else is contagious? Anger, frustration, sadness, stress. I was at the store yesterday, and the woman who was helping me out, I could tell, like, she was just wound up and she was overwhelmed by whatever was going on. And I just looked at her and I said, wow, you seem really overwhelmed right now. And she paused and she was like, oh, how did you know? I said, well, it's contagious. I can feel it. I said, I really hope your day gets better after this. And she just had this, I could see it. Like her facial features changed and relaxed because, yes, the frustration, I picked that up from her, but she was able to pick up a little bit of peace that was contagious. So that's happening with your family. I think hoarding can be contagious because it becomes commonplace. We get used to the chaos. When we live in chaos, what happens? We don't recognize the chaos as chaos anymore. And then when you see someone living more peacefully, more simply, more calmly, you juxtapose that with the chaos that you're living in, and you want to let go so you can experience, as Ryan said, the benefits that that person is experiencing. Let's answer a question from our Patreon Zoom call, the most recent Patreon Zoom call here in a moment. But first, real quick for right here, right now, here's one or two or actually three things going on in the life of the Minimalists. First thing is Sunday Symposium update. I am still working on getting a venue. Our previous venue, which we're still trying to work something out with, called Dynasty Typewriter, lovely venue, but they don't want to do midday events anymore. And so we're still trying to figure something out. Make sure you're on our email list over at theminimalists.com, or you can check in for tickets at sundaysymposium.com if we're going to do one this month in October. But I just wanted to throw that out there right there. If you're on our email list, you will certainly know about it. One other thing that's going on in the life of the Minimalist, as a professor and as a writer and as a voracious reader, I sent out an email recently. There was a typo in it. I said voracious, which means like tell the truth. But I started posting my favorite books of my entire life, basically. People always ask me for book recommendations. And I don't have I've got one page at the Minimalist. Here are some things that I found value from. But let me share some of my favorite books, my favorite novels, my favorite poetry anthologies, my favorite spirituality guides, my favorite nonfiction or self-help books, my favorite short story collections. So many people ask me about those. So I decided, why not just do that on Instagram? So my personal Instagram account is just at Joshua Fields Milburn. We'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. If you want to follow along, it's 30 days, one book a day of some of my favorite books. And it's quite an eclectic mix, everything from memoirs to poetry and everything in between. Also, one quick programming note. Ryan, have you downloaded the new Patreon app yet?
I have not.
They just released the new Patreon app, and it is stunning. I was already impressed with the previous Patreon app, but it is beautiful. This beautiful new interface. There's also community chat in there. We got to figure out how we're going to use that so we can communicate with all of our patrons as well. So if you're one of our Patreon subscribers, check out the new version of the Patreon app. Just go into your app store and download the new app. It also gives you instant, easy access to our RSS feed. Whenever I listen to the audio version of our private podcast, you can listen in any of your favorite podcast players, whether that is Overcast or Feedly or Apple Podcasts, etc. But you can also listen through the Patreon app itself, and the interface just got 1,000% better. It was great before. It is outstanding now. You can check out the new Patreon app in your app store. Let's check in with our most recent Patreon Zoom. We do this every month, the first Friday of each month. Me and Nicodemus and TK and the rest of our team, we're in there. We're talking to you on a Zoom call. We call it the Friday Afternoon Minimalist Zoom Fams, and you're welcome to join us for that. But there's also an entire conversation that's going on in the chat there. There's 100 or 200 of you that join us live for these calls. We record it so you can watch it after the fact. You can be a fly on the wall. You can turn your camera off, turn your mic off, and just watch, or you can participate in the discussion as well. But then there's this whole discussion that's happening in the chat, people interacting with each other, and Alabama's in there like a little spy, and she's hoarding your questions. You got one for us today. What do you got?
I sure do. This one comes from Emily. How can we let go of the stories that condition us to feel like we need to be perfect to do something?
Well, my best friend's on the phone right now, and he is perfect, so this has got to be difficult for you.
Oh man, what an interesting concept, perfection. It wasn't until this last year, Melbourne, where in TK, where we, learned that perfection doesn't necessarily mean the ideal version of something. It means to be complete. And when I look at it from that standpoint, I'm okay with perfection. But I think where we get caught up is we use this excuse of something isn't ideal enough to prevent us from moving forward with something. And I would posit that sometimes it is just an excuse. So to change your story, change the definition of what perfection is. So to look at it from a complete standpoint, that's a much more empowering question than this is a great piece of work, or this is a great thing that I'm going to put out into the world and create. But what's wrong with it? What can I do to fix it? Well, certainly there's always going to be room to fix something, but a complete version in itself is a perfect version of anything.
Speaking of stories, reminds me of a Twilight Zone episode where there was this guy, nobody respected him because he was short, and all he wanted to do was just be a big deal in the world, wanted to be famous, wanted to be rich, anything. And so one day he finally gets his wish and he says, "Oh, I want to be big. I want to be big. I tell you, I want to be so big that everybody sees me, everybody recognizes me, nobody overlooks me anymore. I want to be big." And he wakes up the next morning and he's so tall that he can't even fit in his own apartment and he's miserable. He's like, "Oh, I didn't want to be big like this." His concept of being big wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. And there's something similar going on with perfection. Even the human ideal of perfection, when you really think about it, is a means to an end. If I can only be perfect, then I'll be worthy of love. If I can only be perfect, then I'll be happy. So even when we say we strive for perfection, it's because we believe that perfection will get us something other than itself that will then make our lives complete. But what is your concept of perfection if attaining it doesn't even give you what you need on its own? We got to stop where we are. And we got to say, I'm going to tell a new story. It's time to tell a different story. And it's a story of love that is waiting for me right here, right now, as the person that I am. What makes love beautiful is precisely the fact that I cannot earn it, that I don't need to earn it, but it meets me where I am. And it makes me better along the way, but it doesn't require me to be the best in order to begin the dance. That's perfection. That's wholeness. That's health.
Amen.
Oh, man. Ryan, we got so much more to talk about with you, but first, Malabama, what do you got for us?
Here's a minimalist insight from one of our listeners.
Hi guys, I'm Ashley, calling from the bottom of Western Australia. Firstly, thank you for the immense value you've added to mine and my husband's life. Our home, our finances and attitudes are much more tranquil since following your work. I wanted to comment on something I witnessed recently. My husband and I were on a cruise to Iceland. And it was our first time, so we were really struck by all the luxury and the wealth surrounding us and, the endless bars, spiral staircases, those kinds of things. And one day, one of the shops on the ship had a sale event, everything under $10. So I thought it'd be a bit of fun, go down there. Who doesn't love a bit of a shopping spree? So got down there and it was an absolute madhouse. It was really crowded. I actually saw someone elbow another person out of the way to get to a rack. People were getting verbally aggressive towards each other, and their clothes weren't even that good. They were just standard and with all the ship's logos on them. I stood back and was really quite shocked at the behaviour of these people, most who were over 40, who could clearly afford to go on this fairly expensive cruise, and their desperation to buy things they already had. And to be honest, I used to be like that. But in that moment, I think the past few years of learning how to let go and learning the true value of things meant I could let that sale go. And that was a huge change. So I guess just want to say thanks for your teachings on how to be calm, more content, and really ultimately more free. If you're ever in Albany, Western Australia, let me know. We'd love to grab a beer and have a chat.
All right, y'all, we'll see you on Patreon for the full 2-hour maximal edition of episode 413, which includes a bunch more answers to a bunch more questions like, is it okay to finance a car if the loan's interest rate is lower than my savings account's interest rate? What do the minimalists think about the mobs that recently stormed high-end luxury stores in California? Do you have any advice for a husband and wife who want to live in an RV with their 3 children? And a bunch more questions for Ryan Nicodemus and me and TK and Malabama and Danny and Sean. We got so much more to cover on the Minimalist Private Podcast. Also this week, a private minimalist home tour from one of our listeners, an aggressively simple bungalow in Australia that you will not want to miss, plus much, much more of less. And if you want to hear all that, visit patreon.com/theminimalist or click the link in the description to subscribe and get your personal link so that our weekly Maximal episodes play in your favorite podcast app. You'll also gain access to all of our podcast archives all the way back to episode 001. And if you're still on the fence, Patreon is now offering free trials. So if you'd like to test drive our private podcast, you can join for 7 days for free. Here's one more reason to join, a testimonial from one of our lovely Patreon subscribers. Jenny says, your private podcast completely changed my family's life. We sold our giant American dream house and got rid of truckloads of stuff. Man, wow. We bought a house that was half the size with the intention of being able to travel at least 4 weeks a year. And we've exceeded that and are on the path to being financially free as well. Also, I love that you added TK Coleman to the private podcast. The Maximal episodes are the best. Amen to that. That is our minimal episode for today. If you leave here with just one message, let it be this. Love people and use things. Because the opposite never works. Thanks for listening, y'all.
We'll see you next time.
Peace.
Every little thing you think that you need. Every little thing you think that you need. Every little thing that's just feeding your greed. Oh, I bet that you'd be fine without it.